with you. One of her very favorite songs.
And of course, she chose them.
Yeah, every single one.
Do you guys want to stand or sit? How do you prefer? Or dance? Ready? Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart. 'Twas grace that taught my heart. And grace my fears relieved. How precious that grace appeared. How precious that grace appeared. Amazing grace together now. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Through many dangers, promised land. Through many dangers, toils and we have already come. We have already come. Was grace that brought us? Grace that brought us saved us far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been here 10,000 years, we've been here 10,000, bright shining like the star, bright shining like the sun. We've known mercies to sing God's praise. That's when we first begun. And when we first begun. Amazing grace, amazing grace, amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved the wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
In the waters of baptism, Davida died with Christ and rose with him to new life. May she now share with him eternal glory. O God, to whom mercy and forgiveness belong, hear our prayers on behalf of your servant Davida, whom you have called out of this world. And because she put her hope and trust in you, welcome her carried safely home to heaven and the eternal kingdom. We ask this through our Lord Jesus Christ, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit forever and ever. Amen. Another one of her songs.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome.
Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit upon his glorious throne, and all the nations will be assembled before him. And he will separate them one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right and the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. A stranger, and you welcomed me. Naked, and you clothed me. Ill, and you cared for me. In prison, and you visited me.' Then the righteous will answer him and say, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you ill or in prison and visit you?' And the king will say to them in reply, 'Amen, I say to you, whatever you did for one of these least sisters or brothers of mine, you did for me.'" The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise.
A few simple and short remarks. We're here in this church this morning because this is a church that Davida loved. This parish, this congregation, when she was a very bright, precocious young girl, she would come here and hang out and sing and pray and be musical. And she loved the stained glass windows, and she very carefully instructed me to say, "You should all look at the stained glass windows." Because what this community of faith did as they put the church together was in the stained glass windows, they put the women and men in the human family that made a difference. And as a very young person, she wanted to make some differences. And we're here today because she did. In that stained glass, you'll find Moses and Muhammad, Jesus and the Buddha, Florence Nightingale, George Washington Carver, Jane Addams, Mahatma Gandhi. The range is as wide and as deep as Davida's life was. But the window in the back, I am to make special notice of. As you leave, please look up. You can look around now. No one will blame you. This is the window that invites us all to go out into the world, to participate in the life of the world, to make a difference into the world. Go ye into all the world. The circular lines represent the globe, and the radiating rays symbolize our outreaching service. I can imagine the young Davida looking out at that window while singing in the choir. And then Davida, in our last conversation, told me about that window, and she said it reminded her of a story about someone attending a Quaker meeting. After sitting in silence for a long time, Quakers, the visitor leaned over to the next person and asked, "When does the service begin?" And the answer, "The service begins when the meeting ends." A life of service. This morning we are blessed to have people who've known Davida share a bit of their experience, strength, and hope with her.
My name's Sheila. And Davida was my aunt. My first memory of Aunt Dee was when she came to visit with my Uncle Patrick. He was my mother's brother, and he and Davida were married for a short time in the early 70s. It was a big deal that my uncle was coming for a visit because he lived in California and we lived in Ohio. It was also a big deal because he and my mom were born and raised in Ireland and were the only two from their family to come live in the States. He was our only relative in the States. But this visit was particularly special because we were going to meet our new Aunt Dee. I was somewhere around 3 years old at the time, and I don't remember much about their visit, but she made a very lasting impression on me. At that point in my life, I still slept with one of those quilted satin baby blankets with the satin border sewn all around the edges. And I loved that blanket because the fabric always felt nice and cool. And when I couldn't sleep, I could put the cool fabric against my cheek, and it helped me fall back to sleep. The way I remember it, my parents decided I was too old to keep sleeping with a baby blanket. So they took it away one night while I was sleeping in the hopes I wouldn't notice, but I did, and I was very sad. This happened either just prior to the arrival of my uncle and Aunt Dee, or during their visit. I don't know. I only know that somehow she knew about it. And I remember my parents sitting with Uncle Patrick and Aunt Dee in the living room and calling me over. And Aunt Dee gestured for me to come over to her, and I noticed she was holding a rectangle box, like a shirt box from a department store. And I remember she handed me the box, and she had a very kind and loving smile. And I opened the box, and inside was a brand new quilted satin baby blanket with a satin border around the edges. Just like the one that I had. And looking back now, I think here was a woman who already had spent years working around the world to alleviate all kinds of incredible suffering. She was having an impact on a global scale, but she could still look at one small girl and see that one little girl needed comfort, and so she provided comfort. She didn't compare my sadness or need for comfort to anyone else's. It didn't matter to her that a 3-year-old child in Ohio needing a security blanket doesn't really hold a candle to the suffering she'd seen in her medical work and her experiences abroad. To her it was simple. I needed comfort, so she gave it. I loved her so much in that moment, and she's held a special place in my heart since then. But I've never really been sure how much of my admiration had to do with being grateful for the gift of a new blanket, and how much of it had to do with the fact that she gave me a baby blanket after my parents said that I couldn't have one. So to 3-year-old me, it was both an act of bravery and rebellion, and I was in awe of her for that. But I wasn't the only one who saw something special in Aunt Dee. My parents truly loved her. They loved her so much that when she and my uncle decided to divorce each other, my mom and dad decided that they weren't divorcing anyone. So Aunt Dee stayed part of our lives forever, even though we would really seldom see her in person over the years. The next time I remember Aunt Dee coming was when I was 8 years old, and my mom had been diagnosed with cancer and given just weeks to live. When Aunt Dee got the news, she dropped everything to come be there for my mom and for my family. Not only did she provide love, support, and valuable medical expertise, She also offered to pay for my mom's sisters to come from Ireland to be with her during her illness and what would be her final days. I know a lot of people were around at that time, but a lot of what went on is a blur to me. But I remember Andy being there, and I remember being glad that she was there. After my mom passed away, my dad and Andy continued to stay in contact. Her relationship to my family might be considered strange to some, since she was no longer technically related to us after she and my uncle divorced. But she and my dad were both the kind of people who recognized good people and actively surrounded themselves with good people. And what was so fun about their relationship was that the two of them had polar opposite views when it came to politics. And they were equally passionate about their perspectives. But they had much more in common than not. And that allowed them to love each other, respect each other's opinions, even when they disagreed. And this was such a normal thing to my siblings and I growing up that we never gave it a second thought. But I realize now what a blessing their continued friendship was for us, not just because of my personal view of Andy as kind of a global guardian angel, but because they modeled how to love and respect each other, even when we disagree with each other. And my siblings and I always loved Andy and are grateful to have had her in our lives. And we will always remember her with much love.
I met Dr. Taylor during the Biafra War. Excuse me. Dr. D. Taylor. DBS. Dr. D. Taylor, a true physician. You specialize in achieving great things with minimum resources. You're the mouthpiece of the children and people of Biafra. We salute you. We join God in saying to you, thank you, thank you, thank you. After 2 years of medical school in the University of Lagos, the Biafra War broke out. Lagos was no longer safe for me to stay, so I had to go home. Initially, I worked with doctors in hospitals, but as the cities fell and mothers were dying from air raids and accidents, it was necessary for us to take care of the abandoned, malnourished children on the street. At this point, a few doctors and locals, with the help of the French Red Cross and Caritas, organized sick bays. These are for children who were ill enough to require intensive feeding. And then we had a big high school that we converted to a hospital. And these are children who were ill enough to be seen twice a day. Doctors with these two organizations came in 3-month rotations to help us. This is how I met Dr. D. Taylor. She came in as one of those. And she really taught us how to use what we had to help to do the best for our children. Well, towards the end of her stay, one evening, and that was towards the end of the war, she said to me, anywhere you want to go in the United States, I'll give you a recommendation. I didn't take her serious. My chances of surviving the war wasn't that good. I thanked her anyway. Thankfully, the war ended. And Dr. Taylor did not give me a recommendation. She did not give me a reference. No. She did the legwork. She asked for transcripts. She did all she could. She did what was necessary to get me to UCLA Medical School. She housed me in a dorm, Wayburn Hall. All expenses paid. This young, simple lady who was not a millionaire got me through medical school. Towards the end, I did help a little bit, but she took very good care of me. I lost her for a while, but I prayed to God to let me find her. Later on, I found out this lady cared for me so much to disappear, to step out of the picture. When her motive for helping me was questioned for some reason by somebody, and I don't understand why. I still don't understand why. Because she was my big sister, and she treated me as one. Well, fast forward. One of the happiest days in my life was when I got a call from her at my office. I was beyond, I don't know how to explain it. That was a miracle. She had treated me like a sister, yes. And in my culture, it was my responsibility to take care of her towards the end. And I wish I had more time to do that. But God provided Tom. Tom has provided the excellent, loving care that they deserve. Thank you, Tom. We're your family now. We keep an eye on you. Because that's what she told us to do. Under Dr. Detail and my supervising pediatrician and mentor too, Dr. Davida Coady, whom we lost less than a year ago, and those innocent children. It was very easy to change my specialty. You see, I had gone to the University of Lagos to be an obstetrician gynecologist, but this changed it. Plus, somebody gave me a free ride to the best institution, one of the best institutions, one of the top 10 institutions in this country. So I am forever grateful. The thousands of children that she helped, myself, and the millions more that I've been blessed to touch. Thank you, thank you. We consider you our hero. Well, she has impacted all of you, all of us. Let's keep the light burning. She has taught us, she has shown us that no obstacle should be big enough to deter our goal for the greatest good. Goodbye, my sister. Rest in peace.
I met Davida Coady, and she changed my life. I suspect there are a lot of us here in this room who could say exactly that, with gratitude, fondness, and a little bit of awe. Usually it goes something like, I met Davida Coady, and the next thing I knew I was volunteering at fill in the blank. Or, I met Davida Coady, and the next thing I knew I was on a plane heading to fill in the blank. That's my story. I met Davida in 1981. I was 22 years old and frankly pretty clueless. I wanted to work internationally in health and nutrition, and someone had suggested that I should meet her at UCLA where she was teaching. A day later, I found myself volunteering at the Venice Family Clinic, a free clinic which, by the way, she was instrumental in founding and is now the largest free clinic in the United States. 4 months later, I found myself on a plane heading to work on the Salvador-Honduran border to receive refugees Salvadoran refugees crossing the border, fleeing military invasion, bombardment, and massacres. Davida assured me that I would be deported within a couple of months and that I could get on with my life. But in the meantime, I needed to pack 3 changes of clothes, take this copy of Where There Is No Doctor, and catch the next plane that I possibly could, which I did. I mean, who could say no to Davida? And I'm deeply grateful to Davida for seeing in this clueless 22-year-old my potential to become involved in the Salvadoran liberation struggles, to become a health activist for life. Davida was right about most things, although she did get one little detail wrong, which is that I avoided being deported and actually stayed in Central America for the next 14 years. Now, by the time I had met Davida, she was already an international expert in nutrition and health in emergency settings, and Patricia just described one of those amazing experiences that she'd had. She had worked with refugees fleeing disaster, war, and poverty on every continent. In your programs, there's a list of just some of the countries that Davida worked in. And one of the things that Davida mentions in her memoir is that in most of those civil wars and struggles, she never felt like things were particularly black and white. There were no real good guys or bad guys. But she felt differently about the liberation struggles in Central America during the 1980s. Davida firmly took sides with people trying to liberate themselves from unjust, corrupt governments that were carrying out atrocities on their own people, supported to the hilt by the US government. So there's another version of that. I met Davida Coady, and it goes something like this. I met Davida Coady, and the next thing I knew, I was being arrested for protesting. Which might have been, yes, all 3 could be. Might have been the Salvadoran consulate in San Francisco, or Los Angeles, or Washington, D.C., or Fort Bend, Georgia. And I see a lot of people shaking their heads because I think there's a fair number of us that's true. Of course, there were also plenty of folks who got on airplanes too. Davida was one of the first organizers of the East Bay Sanctuary Movement, which sent hundreds of people on delegations to learn firsthand about the massacres that militaries supported and trained by the US government were carrying out in Central America. She inspired and sent hundreds of volunteers, many hundreds of volunteers, to work throughout Mexico and Central America in projects promoting healthcare, clean water and sanitation, human rights, environmental sustainability, and above all, human dignity. Over her life, Davida trained many, many hundreds, probably thousands of health workers and medical students who went on to deliver compassionate care even in the midst of disasters and emergencies. In Central America, there's a way of recognizing fallen comrades, of saying presente. And what that means is that this person remains present to us, that their spirit lives on in us and in our work and in our struggle. and that we carry them forward in what we do. And of the many times, too many times, that I have called out presente for someone's spirit, I really can think of no one who is more truly presente than Davida Coady. So in gratitude for Davida's capacity to inspire us to do things we might never have done, in awe of her powers of persuasion, which were mighty, in recognition of her tireless and lifelong commitment to working for the powerless and the voiceless, and in honor of the legion of people in this room and literally around the world who do say, I met Davida Coady and she changed my life. I invite you to join me in this Central American tribute to Davida. Please stand if you can. And for those of you who aren't familiar with how this goes, it's you could call it a call and response. I say Davida Coady, and you shout out presente. Okay, ready? Davida Coady. Davida Coady. Davida Coady. Thank you, Davida.
I am Saul Irving. I am a retired correctional counselor 3 from the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, and also an option board member. I met Davida in 2007 at a time when the state of California Department of Corrections was having issues, big issues. I served on the governor's board when we were in this think tank trying to bring the R rehabilitation back to the prison system, and we sat there for months at a time, and came up with some ideas. We need to start doing some creative things, work outside the box, use inmates to help other inmates. So a couple of years later, I met Dr. Coady in 2007 and 8 when we were having the issue of trying to hire counselors in our drug and alcohol treatment program, trying to find quality folks, because I would hire 10 and keep 1 after 2 weeks. It was a mess. So someone suggested we go to San Quentin and look at the program options had there. They actually were training inmates how to be substance abuse counselors. So we took a little trip to San Quentin, looked at Tom's program, and fell in love with it, did some vetting, and trying to figure out who is Options Recovery, and found out they had a fantastic reputation. They provided a holistic approach in dealing with drug and alcohol folks, and they had everything, labs, mental health. And I'm like, wow, this is fantastic. So on the way back, I live in Sacramento, on the way back from San Quentin, I got a hold of Tom's number and I called him. Tom and Davida were vacationing or something in Palm Springs. And I asked him, hey, would you help us out in bringing a program for the whole Department of Corrections? Tom thought I was crazy. Davida, I'm sure, probably, just listen to him, just listen to him. And so I said, Tom, I got a checkbook, it's blank, can you help me out? And, oh yeah, we'll help you. So we collaborated. And I found out that I was dealing with some special people. I didn't know Dr. Coady. I didn't know Tom at all. I just, but I found out they were the type of people that love to serve, love to help, and they love to heal people. My dad told me a story about Dr. Coady a long time ago, way before I met her. My dad grew up in a place called Tulare, California, central part of the state of California, on a farm, 12 brothers and sisters, and at the age of 18 he joined the Air Force. So he left Tulare, went to Texas, got trained, and his first deployment was in Alaska, in the middle of the winter, 10 degrees below zero. So Dad, being the type of person was, he wants to figure out what's going on, very inquisitive, went and asked the folks that were fishing and hunting, how do you work? How do you do this in this cold, forsaken place? And they said that we go down to the river and we grab what is called driftwood, wood that has fallen out of the mountains and the plains into the river and kind of floated aimlessly without a purpose down the river. We grab that broken log and we take it out of the water, the log being half wet and half dry, and we light it on fire, we give it a purpose. Dr. Coady was that type of individual. She would take people that were broken, that were discarded by society, and she would take those hands, those helping, serving, healing hands, and take them out of that stream and light them up and give them purpose. So I was astounded by this one. Wow, I'm in corrections. We don't, lock them up, feed them, with 3 B's, you give them bread and Band-Aids and bullets. As long as we do those 3 things, we're okay. But watching her work, case in point, Dr. Coady, when we started the program, we had 50 inmates. And we were going to train them to be substance abuse counselors. So there's an education phase, and there's a period where we actually sit them down and they do their interns, and then we have a graduation period, and then they take the exam. So now we're at the graduation purpose. There was a young man, he was from Southeast Asia, was one of our guest mentor speakers. He gets up and he's thanking Tom and Davida and how much he's changed. He's been changed as a result of this offender mentor certification program, and thanked them. And he also turned around and he thanked his mom, who was also at the graduation. And he told a story about how his mom stayed with him through this whole process and backed him even though he was in jail. And he said, there was a time when we were in Vietnam and I was a baby, and my mom and this doctor escorted us out of the jungle because the Viet Cong was chasing us and took us to safety. When he said that, Dr. Coady looked at the mom. We had a break. She goes up, and she was that doctor that escorted them out of that jungle years ago. And they cried, and I was like, whoa, what do we got here? The second case was early in the training. Dr. Coady came to me and she said, you know what, Saul, we got some broken people here and there's some trauma with them. And I'd like to see if we can treat the trauma. I said, Dr. Coady, these guys are in for gang stuff, murder, robbery. I got 40 psychiatrists, social workers. I've got them all here at this institution. They tried that, but okay, we'll let you do it. And so she said, I'd like to do it in the evening. And I said, okay. So I hired an officer to oversee the look to make sure things were going okay. And I took the officer aside and said, hey, she's going to do a trauma group. I don't know if this is going to go sideways. So you got my telephone number. Make sure that the guys with the guns are out there. Please, I don't want her hurt. So I went home, and on the way back to work the next morning, I called the officer and I asked him how'd it go. And he basically said it was extremely emotional, but it went okay. I said, was Davida still alive? Yes. We're good. So I, you know, we do our little morning meetings to see what else is going on in the prison, because we got rights and all that stuff that goes on there. And I finally get down to our program complex, and I was met by the 15 inmates that were in that group. This is what Davida did. She took 15, 20 inmates and she put them in a circle. She was in that circle. She took a box of Kleenex and put it in the middle. And when it was over, every one of those inmates were crying. The trauma that had been in them for all these years, she was able to break that up. And now we can shape them and make them better people. We do this parallel process where we have them work on themselves and we teach them how to be a substance abuse counselor at the same time. But if you're broken and you've been in prison, these guys were telling me, I haven't cried since I was 8 or 9 years old. And some of them had been in prison for 15 or 20 years. So the remarkable work that Tom and Davida did in that prison and are doing now is phenomenal. We've trained about 400 or 500 inmates so far. Let's get to the point where we train them and they parole. Now these guys, you gotta remember, were lifer inmates. Had no idea that they were going to get out of prison until Davida got old. And then they start paroling. Out of the 400 or 500 inmates that we trained, none of them have been arrested or come back to prison. So again, we've been mandated, Tom, you know, got me working here. I'm retired, right? But I'm still mandated that we are training inmates for all 33 prisons in the state of California. And, you know, because of options in Davida, we signed a contract last week, and we're going to be training inmates in the reception centers also starting next week. So, Tom, I appreciate all that you've done. Just the idea that you allow the love of your life to grace us, to teach us, to mentor us. I appreciate that. Now, I'm going to ask everyone, I'm just going to do something a little bit because I'm a prison guard and I ain't got no sense. We applaud folks that, the warriors, when they make fantastic baskets. You know, we applaud when we're out in the opera houses and whatever, when people sing. We applaud great actors like Martin Sheen when he does his great performance. Can we take a minute to applaud Dr. Davida Elizabeth Coady for doing this?
Martin, alcoholic.
Hi, Mark.
Just a few impromptu remarks. Davida often said that the only things we could take with us at the end of our journey were the things which we cherished and gave away with love, including our precious time and talent. Now, the Irish tell the story of the man who arrived at the gates of heaven and asked to be let in. St. Peter said, of course, just show us your scars. The man said, I have no scars. St. Peter said, what a pity. Was there nothing worth fighting for? Now, that being said, can you imagine what Peter had to say when Davida showed up at the gate a few weeks ago? All of us have personal stories about how this extraordinary woman changed the direction of our lives, and I'm certainly no exception. And one of my favorite stories was the night she came over to our house for dinner, fellow guest asked her, "What do you do?" "Oh, I'm a doctor," she said. "Oh, really? And where do you practice?" "Oh," she said, "when I'm in the States, generally at the Venice Family Clinic, but the majority of my work is in the third world." "Oh," he said, "but why do you go into the third world to practice?" And she said, "Well, I went into the third world and they cracked open my heart and I learned that it was immoral to make a profit from other people's misfortune." There were no further questions. Did I mention that guest was also a doctor? Davida was a very unique and, as you learned earlier, very clever teacher who challenged us to go to those places we did not want to go and to do those things we did not want to do by diving in the deep end and gleefully yelling out, "Come on in, the water's fine." And those of us foolish enough to believe her became damn good swimmers. She was the embodiment of Robert Kennedy's assertion that one heart with is a majority. And she was a member in good standing of that noble order of men and women that defended human rights and demanded social justice. They shared a common vision and a deep thirst for that mysterious nourishment called grace, which soared up and flowed out of all those times and places where they gathered to engage in outrageous forms of compassionate confrontation and heroic acts of nonviolent resistance that took our breath away and renewed the face of the earth. And I was fortunate enough to be present at a few of those times and places with her, and my only contribution was a recitation of the powerful Tagore poem, which happened to be one of her favorites. For her now, the last time, we are called to lift up this nation and all its people to that place where the heart is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depths of truth and tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sands of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action into that heaven of freedom, dear Father. Let our country awake. Amen.
Almost done. Our musicians are Chris and Francesco, who Davida met when they were tiny young people. And they've been friends and companions and allies. We have a few final prayers of commendation and gratitude to God, as you understand God, for sharing Davida Coady with us for all these many years. We could start them with the Serenity Prayer, which I suspect some of you know. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Before we go our separate ways, let us take leave of our sister Davida. May our farewell express our affection for her. May it ease our sadness and strengthen our hope. One day we shall joyfully greet her again when the love of Christ which conquers all things, destroys even death itself. Davida's ashes are being placed in the memorial garden here at Northbrae, which is an expression of Native American spirituality and the gift they give us. Saints of God, come to her aid. Hasten to meet her, angels of the Lord. Receive her soul and present her to God the Most High. Davida, may Christ who called you take you to himself. May angels lead you to the bosom of Abraham. Receive her soul and present her to God the Most High. Eternal rest grant unto her, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon her. Receive her soul and present her to God the Most High. Davida, may the angels lead you into paradise. May the martyrs come to welcome you and take you to the holy city, the new and eternal Jerusalem. After we sing one more song, number 3 of her favorites, we're invited across the road to share some simple food and memories and reflections of Davida. And Tom's suggestion was that each person talk to 2 people they don't know and share some of the love that Davida shared with us. Davida, may the choirs of angels welcome you and lead you to the bosom of Abraham, and where Lazarus is poor no longer, may you find eternal rest.
Oh, when the saints go marching in, oh, when the saints go marching in, oh, Lord, I want to be in that number. Oh, when the saints go marching in, one more time. Oh, when the saints go marching in, oh, marching in, oh, when the saints go marching in, oh, Lord, I want to be in that number. When the saints go marching in, oh, when the poor have won the rights, oh, when the poor have won their rights, oh, Lord, I want to be in that number. When the poor have won their rights, oh, when the saints, oh, when the saints, oh, when the saints go marching in, oh, marching in, oh, when the saints go marching in, oh, Lord, I want to be in that number. Oh, when the saints go marching in, oh, when we all